The DEIA Committee and staff of the Soto Zen Buddhist Association, with the support of the Soto Zen Buddhist Association Board, has been instrumental in envisioning and bringing to fruition the Celebrating the Voices of Women series and this event today. This is part of an ongoing effort to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in Buddhist and Zen practice. Joining us today, I am honored to introduce Reverend Tova Green, resident priest at San Francisco Zen Center. She received Dharma transmission from Reverend Eijun Linda Ruth Cutts in 2015 and is the Branching Streams Director, and recently the producer moderator of the October 19th Hearing Younger Women's Voices event. Reverend Tova Green, Reverend Tova Green will provide the introductory remarks. And again, thank you, everyone. Reverend Tova, please take it from here.
Thank you very much, Sina. So welcome, everyone. I'm very happy to introduce Senior Dharma teacher Eijun Linda Ruth Cutts. She first came to Zen practice when she was a college student in Minnesota, and she visited Sokoji, the temple Suzuki Roshi was abbot of in San Francisco. So she met Suzuki Roshi at that time, attended zazen and lectures, and said to herself, "This is what I want to do." She went back to Minnesota, and then she returned to San Francisco on January 1st, 1971, to live at City Center during the last year of Suzuki Roshi's life. She has lived at San Francisco Zen Center in all three temples, Tassajara Zen Mountain Center, City Center in the city of San Francisco, and Green Gulch Farm in Marin County ever since. But Linda was ordained as a priest in 1975. She received Dharma transmission from Tenshin Reb Anderson in 1996. She served as abbess of San Francisco Zen Center from 2000 to 2007, then was appointed abbess of Green Gulch Farm in 2010 and central abbess in 2014. She continues to teach and lead practice periods at Tassajara, Green Gulch Farm, and elsewhere. Linda met her husband, Steve Weintraub, at City Center. They raised their two children in community at all three temples. During Linda's first practice period at Tassajara in 1972, studying the Prajna Paramita in 8,000 lines, she found the description of Prajna Paramita, the perfection of wisdom, that includes the lines, "Homage to the perfection of wisdom, the lovely, the holy. She is a source of light," and it goes on. Taken by the references to an awakened being in female form, Linda brought it to the attention of Richard Baker, who was abbot at that time, and suggested that it be included in the chanted liturgy to balance all the references to males. And we chanted every morning today at City Center. Her interest in learning and teaching about women in Buddhism continued in the 90s and beyond. In the 90s, Eijun Cutts offered a class at Green Gulch Farm on women in Buddhism. She and Wendy Johnson co-led one-day women's sittings for several years at Green Gulch Farm at a time when Linda was exploring feminine archetypes such as the Great Mother. She collaborated with the Jungian analyst Virginia Bean Rutter in leading mother-daughter events at Green Gulch Farm, including a May Day celebration in which the daughters enacted the myth of Demeter and Persephone. Linda's essay, The Dark Clue, was published in the anthology Buddhist Women on the Edge in 1996, and another essay, Breaking Through the Concrete, in Being Bodies, Buddhist Women on the Paradox of Embodiment, published in 1997. In 2005, Linda co-led with Dr. Rusa Chu a pilgrimage to China with 32 women participants visiting temples devoted to Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of infinite compassion in female form, including a visit to the island Putoshan, traditionally known as Kuan Yin's birthplace. I met Linda at Green Gulch Farm in the early 90s, and a few years later asked her to be my teacher. I was one of the 8 women she gave the precepts to in a lay ordination ceremony in 1998, and have studied with her ever since. I consider it great good fortune to have this very nourishing relationship with my teacher, and I think you will really enjoy hearing her speak today. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you, Tova, for your introduction. And I want to thank all of SZBA for inviting me to speak in this series, including Zena Manes. Is that how you pronounce it, Manes? Shokuchi Deirdre Kerrigan, Tova, Chris Fortin, Keegan Breckenridge, all have been involved in coordinating and arranging for this talk today. I also, before I begin, realized I had this great gratitude arise in me for the scholars that we depend on so much, especially in this case, looking at this fascicle, Miriam Levering, Paula Arai, the late Rita Gross, and also all of the translators, Kaz Tanahashi, Stanley Weinstein, Carl Bielfeld, and of course, Shohaku Okamura, who did a Genzo-e on this same fascicle years ago. Without the scholarship and this understanding, I feel it would be impossible for me really to study the Dharma and this Dharma work in particular. So I was asked to say a little bit at the beginning, kind of a mini way-seeking mind talk, how I came to practice. And this will be very brief, just taking a few things. As Tova said, I began being interested in practice while I was at the University of Minnesota through meeting Reb Anderson Tenshin Zenki, who was also going to the University of Minnesota, and he gave Zazen instruction to a number of his friends and had a little mini kind of sitting group. And he then dropped out of school in 1967 to go to study with Suzuki Roshi. And I was trying to sit on my own then. And in 1968, I traveled to San Francisco from St. Paul to be a kind of guest student at Sokoji. And as Tova said, I attended lectures and so forth. I had Zazen with the community, and Suzuki Roshi very kindly did a Zazen posture adjustment, which really made a big difference to me. I also saw what were considered older students, people who had been practicing for about a year and maybe had been to Tassajara, watching them practice, and it made a huge impression on me. And as Tova said, I really decided that this is what I wanted to do. However, I had a junior year abroad program that I had been accepted into in Florence, Italy, I really wanted to go. So I did, stayed another year on my own, and then figured out a way to transfer to UC Berkeley, but live at Zen Center to finish my degree. And what I had really wanted to do is just be at Zen Center, but I ended up finishing school. That year was the last year of Suzuki Roshi's life. And we were in 300 Page Street at that time. We had gotten the building in 1970. And Suzuki Roshi was really around the building at meals, also giving lectures until he became too sick later on that year to actually participate. There was one as a very new student, I didn't have that much access to him kind of one-on-one, but there was really an important thing that happened to me that really echoes the fascicle Raihai Tokuzui, Bowing to Receive the Marrow, that we'll be talking about today. It was probably in the first month or so I had been at Page Street, and I was asked, as people are asked, to do one of the temple jobs of ringing the time drum and bell in the morning. And I was standing there in meditation posture by the drum and the bell when Suzuki Roshi came down the stairs, those of you who know Page Street, with his Jisha, Catherine Thanis, carrying the incense. And I was standing very meditatively, trying to be mindful of what I was supposed to be doing. And when he got to the bottom of the stairs right in front of me, he bowed. And I was such a new student that I didn't know to bow back. I just stood there. I didn't even look at him. I just stood there. And then he bowed again. And I just stood there. And on the third time he bowed, Catherine Thanis said, "Bow." So I did my bow. And I've thought of this encounter many, many times. And I have no idea really what was in his heart or his mind when he bowed to me in that way. And it's not for me to know really what that action meant to him. But for me, it was very, very important. I felt acknowledged. I felt seen. I felt respected. I felt confirmed in some unknown way. And I was such a new student. I didn't even know how to think about it, but it hit me so deeply. In Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, Suzuki Roshi says, and this is a kind of prelude to what we'll be talking about, when everything exists within your big mind, all dualistic relationships drop away. There is no distinction between heaven and earth, man and woman, teacher and disciple. Then Buddha bows to Buddha, and you bow to yourself. This is the true bow. So that's enough of my way-seeking mind, dipping into my way-seeking mind talk. And now turning towards the fascicle that I've chosen. This fascicle, Raihai Tokuzui, happened to be the subject for Suzuki Roshi's thesis at Komazawa University in 1930. He was exploring the relationship of teacher and disciple as discussed in this particular Dogen fascicle. And I found that very interesting. Like, what was it that he was studying? So we don't have a copy of the thesis itself. There's just an outline of his in English of the, we don't have a copy in English, of the thesis. And basically it didn't really illuminate what I found in this fascicle when I finally read it. And to my surprise and really astonishment, I found Dogen being exceedingly clear and supportive of the issues of gender equality and freedom from gender roles that flow from our practice, from our non-dualistic practice, and the true phenomena, the true form of all phenomena of emptiness or thus. So this fascicle, I chose it as the theme for the last practice period that I led at Tassajara in winter spring 2023, not that long ago. And today it's impossible to bring up everything that's in this fascicle. It took, I barely touched on everything during this Tassajara practice period of 90 days. There's so much in it, each phrase, each word, and with, as I said, the scholarship to help me know what the references were and so forth. We will not be able to do that today, but there are a few things that I do want to touch on with you. And they're kind of the main points for me of the fascicle, including bowing, recognizing and your true teacher, recognizing a guiding teacher, and also bringing up two particular teachers, Moshan Liaoran, Acharya Moshan Liaoran and Miaoxin, who we chant, many practice places chant a list of women ancestors and teachers, and Dogen brings those women up in this fascicle. So I wanted to bring up their stories. They're really teaching stories and koan, so there really isn't time to go in them in depth, but I wanted to bring that up. And then the last thing, and this is one of the more surprising things that I found in this fascicle, is Dogen's diatribe. I don't use the word lightly, diatribe against the common attitudes and practices towards women held by Buddhist teachers and institutions of his day. And he does not mince words. And I did want to read to you because it's very, I feel like it is so current, au courant, some of the things he says and his look at gender with the eye of radical non-dualistic teaching. So those are the things I'll be bringing up, even though there's so much in the fascicle beyond that, but those to me are the main points. So a couple of things that are kind of background for this fascicle, which are not that easy to contemplate, are the androcentric, male-centered, and misogynist attitudes that we can find in the Buddhist teachings and from Buddhist teachers, including such things as Buddhas cannot be embodied in a female body, that gender eclipses seniority and understanding of Dharma and Dharma realization, and that there are traditions of magical sex changes, and and also that being reborn as a man was seen as a fortunate rebirth. These are all views that you can find in the teaching and from famous teachers, revered teachers. And it's painful. And I just wanted to mention that this is kind of background for Dogen's commentary and what he has to say. I wanted to read this to you from Rita Gross. This is a quote from Asanga, the Yogacara teacher and philosopher who wrote the Bodhisattva Bhumi, who is highly, highly regarded. And he says, completely perfected Buddhas are not women. And why? Precisely because a bodhisattva, from the time he has passed beyond the first incalculable age of his career, has completely abandoned the woman's estate. Ascending to the most excellent throne of enlightenment, he is never again reborn as a woman. All women are by nature full of defilement and of weak intelligence, and not by one who is full of defilement and weak intelligence is completely perfected Buddhahood attained. So this is, these are the words of a Mahayana teacher of renown. So as I say, you can find these kinds of teachings in the Mahayana as well as old wisdom schools. And this misogynist doctrine is also refuted, is not held by everyone, but it's been carried forward into our day and age as well. So a little about Raihai Tokuzui. This fascicle was written by Dogen early in his writings that make up his masterwork of Treasury of the True Dharma Eye, was maybe the 8th in the list of fascicles that he wrote. This was written in 1240. And it turns out that there was 2 sections to this fascicle, and one was kind of hidden away and not circulated like the other fascicles, the other essays. And it was found again at Eijun in the 18th century, in the 1700s, in what was called secret Shobogenzo. And it's not exactly sure why it was hidden away or who hid it, or there isn't any document that says why. However, perhaps because Dogen so criticizes and so calls to task the teachers of his day and the practices of the Buddhist institutions of his day, and does not, as I said, mince words, perhaps it was radical, too radical, and so not wanting to be criticized or to be seen as that far away from mainstream, it was hidden and didn't come out until relatively recently, 1700s. So Dogen, as many of you know his life story, went to China, and when he returned, he brought back with him, he really felt not only did he receive Dharma transmission from Ru Jing, but he felt he had encountered the true Dharma and many different practices than what he was seeing in Japan. And he also, one of the things that he was exposed to was the fact that women in the Chinese Sung Buddhist practices were abbesses or abbots or abbesses of temples, were Dharma heirs of teachers, had their own Dharma heirs, were in collections, not that many, but were in collections of teachings. And so this was maybe not what he was finding in Japan. And this was the standard. This was the standard of how women were treated and as practitioners. So there's some evidence that Dogen did have women in his earliest Sangha. In 1230 to 1243, he was in a temple, and there's documents and notes that say, for example, Acharya Ryonen was praised by Dogen in some writing he did. There was a nun named Eigi who was part of a study group. There was a donor, Shogaku, who donated, was a great benefactor, donated a Dharma hall, and an unnamed nun who was also noted, was in a study group. So he did have women in his Sangha, and perhaps from his encounters in China, he felt this was the actual way to practice in with men and women receiving and being exposed to the Dharma. So in these nunneries and in China, women had stories about them, poems that they had written, Dharma talks. So he goes a step further in Raihai Tokuzui by actually advocating that male students take on women as their teachers if they find a woman who understands and has attained Dharma, Tokudo, attained the way, and that they are great. These are, if you find someone who is a daijobu, or a great person, this is one of the epithets of the Buddha, to find someone, doesn't matter if they're a male or female, take them as your teacher. And not only that, but make offerings to them, study diligently with them. So he did advocate that and praises in this fascicle men who did take women as their teacher. So, let's see, the title, Raihai Tokuzui, which means bowing to the Raihai is to bow, bowing to the marrow. The Zui is bowing to attaining the marrow, comes from the story, which is told in a lot of different fascicles in Twining Vines and in other places, the story of Bodhidharma and his 4 disciples, which some of you probably know. And his 4 disciples included Songchur, who was a nun, and he asked all 4 of his disciples what to express their understanding. And for the first person, he said, "You have attained my skin." Songchur was the second one, and he said, "You have attained my flesh." The next person, Dao Yu, he said, "You have attained my bones, skin, flesh, bones." And then the last person was Huika. Huika was, as you recall, this student who stood in the snow and ended up in the teaching story cutting off his arm to express his sincerity of wanting Bodhidharma to open the gate of sweet dew and teach him. And he, Huika, did not say anything, but just bowed, did full prostrations, and then stood. So this echoes other sutras, the Vimalakirti Sutra, where silence, noble silence, is expressing the full understanding, non-dual understanding. So this bowing to the marrow, he said to Huika, "You have attained my marrow." So skin, flesh, bones, and marrow. There's a lot to say about that teaching story, and Dogen has a lot to say about it. Just one basic thing he does say is that all 4 of them had completely, they were part of his own body. And it wasn't, deeper, deepest, and it wasn't like that. However, he did choose Huika as his successor. So Rai, the word Rai means to make prostrations, to actually touch your forehead to the ground as a sign of respect and offering and ceremony and courtesy. Hai, Raihai, is worshiping and ceremony, and the two together is prostration. Toku is to acquire or attain, and Zui is marrow. So Raihai is making offerings and offering your full body in respect, and not only respect for the teacher, but giving away, giving up your body completely and plunging into the bow. So Ru Jing, Dogen's teacher in China, gave him a bowing verse, which is, I have a different, I'm going to give you two versions of it, but this is one translation. Bower and bowed to are naturally empty and still. The bodies of self and other are essentially non-dual. Mystical communion is inconceivable. This mystical communion is kanodoko, or spiritual affinity and connection and entanglement with our teachers, with the Buddhas and ancestors. And the other verse, which I learned from Tenshin Roshi, from Reb, who learned it from Katagiri Roshi, is, I think, a different translation of Ru Jing's poem, which is the one who is bowing, the one who is bowed to, their nature, no nature, my body, others' body, not to, plunging into the inexhaustible vow, living in harmony with all. This is a wonderful poem while bowing that I've practiced over the years. So there's much more to say about this, but I'm going to move on. Dogen wrote a poem called Raihai, which kind of expresses this kind of interfusion of self and other and absolute and everyday life. So at the beginning of Raihai Tokuzui, it says, when one practices supreme and perfect enlightenment, the most difficult task is to get a guide and teacher. That teacher is not in the form of, this is Dogen's translation translated of Dogen. That teacher is not in the form of a man or a woman, but rather will be a person of great resolve. And the word he uses is for a person of great resolve is daijobu, which is an epithet of the Buddha meaning a great person. And it doesn't actually say a man or a woman. But who you choose as a teacher is a person that you can trust, who is of great resolve. So in writing this, he makes a point of saying how important it is to have a teacher and a guiding teacher in your life, which he also wrote, 10 points for practicing the way. One of those points also is find a guiding teacher, a teacher who tames people, like tames horses, who really works with you closely and carefully, invests in you. This is all part of what Dogen is saying in this fascicle. Find a teacher, and then once you find them, practice diligently and take care of that person. Make offerings, and this is all part of this Raihai, and offerings of your whole body in bows. So the teacher who has attained the marrow, who understands the Dharma, it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, just pay your respects carefully, take care of them. And this is one of the quotes. When you meet teachers who expound unsurpassed Bodhi, you must not consider their caste. You must not look at their facial features. You must not scorn their faults. Simply because we respect and value prajna, we should, make offerings to them. Then Dogen brings up some of these practices that are not this, that he so criticizes. And this, when I said there's this strong language, I'm just quoting the translation. However, after describing how you take care of somebody who has attained the way or attained the marrow, then he says, however, those imbeciles, another translation is those ignoramuses who do not listen to the teaching of the Buddha say, I'm a senior monk and I don't pay obeisance to a younger monk who has acquired the Dharma. I'm one who's practiced over a long time and I don't bow to other people. I've studied all this. I have an institutional position. I don't bow to other people who don't have that and are less. I don't bow to a nun, even who has acquired the Dharma. These are these quotes. He's saying what ignoramuses or imbeciles say. I don't bow to a nun, even if she's attained the marrow of the Dharma. Or I belong to, my family has higher status than yours, so I don't bow for you. So Dogen says, ignoramuses such as these neither see nor listen to the Buddha, Dharma, because they have left the land of their father. This is the Lotus Sutra, prodigal son, to wander in vain among the roads of another land. So he has very strong words to say about people who somehow see themselves as above others, even people who have, attained the marrow, who have realized their true self. So, I've got seniority, my family's high status. I'm a gender issue. I'm a male and you're a female, so I don't bow to you. So at that time in the Buddha's institutions and where Dogen in Japan, there was practices like this that he was very critical of and felt people knew nothing about Buddhism, actually, if they practiced in this way. And then he brings up the teacher Jiaozhou, and he quotes him saying, Jiaozhou started practicing when he was quite old, when he was 60, and then began teaching when he was 80, and supposedly lived till 120. And Jiaozhou is said, and he's praising Jiaozhou. Jiaozhou says, I set out on my pilgrimage, and even if a person is 7 years old and they are superior to me, I will ask them about the Dharma. A young woman, a young girl of 7 years old, I'll ask them about the Dharma. And even if they're 100 years old, senior to me in many ways, but don't understand the Dharma, I will teach them. So this attitude of whoever understands the Dharma, I will ask them for teaching. It doesn't matter where they fall in terms of age or gender or family status or anything. If they understand the Dharma, I will ask them. And if they don't, I will teach them. And Dogen praises Jiaozhou very much. Now, I want to, I'm looking at the time, but I want to continue going. He brings up, it's interesting, he brings up and praises the monks who choose women to be their teacher, who understand this point. And then he tells the story of Acharya Moshan Liaoran, as well as Miaoxin. And just to say a little bit about these two teachers, they kind of share a Dharma family. And I don't have a chart to show you or anything, but coming from the sixth ancestor, you have Matsu and Huangbo and Lin Ji and Moshan Liaoran was the disciple of Gao An Da Go, who was a disciple. She was the aunt of Linji or Rinzai's disciple, Dharma aunt. So and Miaoxin was Yangshan's disciple, and she's also in this family of disciples and stemming from the sixth ancestor, as most lineages do. So in this story of Moshan Liaoran, there's a teacher who was Rinzai or Linji's disciple named Shixian, and he had received Dharma transmission from Linji. And there's other stories where Moshan Liaoran's teacher actually was very involved in Linji's awakening story. But anyway, we won't have to get into that. But so Xian left Rinzai, left Linji, and decided to visit Moshan Liaoran, who had her own temple on Mount Mo. Moshan, Shan is the mountain. So it turns out, and this isn't in Raihai Tokuzui, but this story is in other transmission of the lamp and other places. He did not respect Moshan, it says in these other texts from the time. He did not respect Moshan because she was a woman, is what it says. So he arrives at her temple and he says, if I find somebody worthy, then I'll stay around. And if I don't, then I'll turn over the meditation seat. So in this version, he comes in to her temple. Picture this. He's wearing a sun hat. This isn't in Raihai, it's in another one of these descriptions. He's wearing a hat, he's got his sandals on, and he goes into the Dharma hall, just extremely rude, does not follow the forms of meeting an abbot or an abbess of a temple, and kind of comes in there. And so she sends her jisha, her attendant, to ask this visitor who's been very rude, Your Reverence, are you here for sightseeing, or did you come to study the Buddha Dharma? And at that point, he's kind of, this is my commentary, he's kind of taken aback. Anyway, he says, I've come to study the Dharma. So then Moshan basically sets things up. So he needs to follow the procedures that one would follow coming to visit a teacher and asking for Buddha Dharma. So she goes and he comes in, but he's still wearing his hat. This is in one version, not in Raihai. So he does take off his sandals though, but he's got his hat on. And she says, a kind of a standard thing, where did you come from? And he says, from the entrance to the road. And she says, why don't you remove your hat? And he didn't answer for some time. And then he finally removed his hat and bowed. So this would be standard procedure, you know, in a respectful way. So this question, where did you come from? He answers, from the entrance to the road. And there's a pun, there's a play on words here, which of course I wouldn't know, but for the commentary, entrance to the road, it's a pun on the word road, row, which also means mouth. And she says, why did you come without shutting it? Which is Moshan playing with, you know, the word entrance, which also means mouth. You know, why didn't you block your mouth, buddy? You know. So this, there's also another meaning of row, which might also mean exposed. And her, why didn't you shut this or block it? Why didn't you come here after blocking it? And then he says, and he did bow to her then he says, what is Moshan? Meaning, what is Mount Mo, this her teaching seat? And she says, it doesn't show its peak. It's, you can't say, it does, you can't say what it is, the mountain, or herself really, because she's Moshan herself, right? On her mountain, Mount Mo. What is Mount Mo? It doesn't show its peak. You can't grasp it. You can't, it's beyond. And then he says, what sort of a person is on the mountain? And she says, one without marks, such as male or female. And he is, this saying about marks of male and female is, echoes the story from the Vimalakirti Sutra of the goddess who switched places, did a magical sex change with Shariputra to show the emptiness of all conditioned things, of all marks are empty. All dharmas are marked by emptiness. So you can't ever grasp it in any complete I gotcha way. And she says, neither male nor female. And he says, why don't you change yourself? Referring to the story of changing into, also the Naga princess in the Lotus Sutra changed and showed that not that she needed to be a Buddha in a male's body, but that she could, to demonstrate her full capacity. So this is what I mean by this fascicle. There's so much that's within that's being referred to, and that one, if one isn't familiar with it, it's hard to understand what's going on. But he says, what sort of a person is on the mountain? And she says, one without marks, such as male and female. And then he says, well, why don't you change yourself? And she says, I'm not a fox spirit. What would I change? She doesn't take the bait, basically, that somehow she's embodied as female, and somehow she has to change to express that she has attained the marrow of Buddha Dharma. She's not going to fool around with that. I'm not a fox spirit who changes. I don't need to. What do I need to do that for? What would I change? This is who I am. And at that, the master bowed. And, you know, this echoes the goddess in Shariputra in the Vimalakirti Sutra, where she says, I've been practicing for all these years, and I've been searching for the marks of a female and can't really find them. So what would I change? This is the understanding of the emptiness of all dharmas. All dharmas are marked by emptiness rather than being caught by that and gender. So he ended up on his own accord deciding to stay and study with Moshan Liaoran, and he became the gardener in her temple for 3 years. So later, after he, it says, appeared in the world, which means took a dharma seat and had his own temple, this particular teacher, he said, I received half a ladle from Linji, Rinzai, and half a ladle from Papa or Dad or Father Linji, and half a ladle from Mom or Mother. I think it's more colloquial, the words that are in the Fescal. Half a ladle from Moshan Liaoran, and I have been fully satisfied ever since. So he really pays homage to Moshan. He's filled up with her Dharma and with the Dharma from Linji. So Moshan had her own temple, and there's other stories about her, which I'm not going to go into right now, but I wanted to, I'm looking at the time. The other nun or woman teacher that Dogen brings up is the nun Miaoxin. And Miaoxin was Yangshan's disciple. However, there are no dates for her. And also, it's not clear where Dogen found this story. But he definitely, it's a full koan about Miaoxin. And basically, just to recap it for you, he was Yangshan's student and in his community, and he needed a director of secular affairs, some temple office. And everybody, all the dragons and elephants, felt she was the best. He asked around the community, they all felt Miaoxin was the best, and she was chosen as a Dai Go Bu, as a person of resolve. And Yangshan said, even though she's a woman, she was chosen by everyone. So that little, in all the translations, some of the translators dropped that little phrase, but it is in one of them. She has the determination of a person of great resolve. So she went to the bottom of the mountain. Yangshan was up on the temple, and she was down in another kind of office situation, outer building, and as the director of secular affairs. And one day, 17 monks showed up wanting to climb the mountain to study with Yangshan. But it was late in the day, and so they took lodging down in this office area where Miaoxin, that was her office, and they're sitting around in kind of a resting posture with their rakusus on, and talking amongst each other, and the sixth ancestors koan about the flag moving. It's not the wind moving, it's not the flag moving, it's your mind moving, that very famous koan. They were discussing this all together, and Miaoxin was next door, and I guess the walls were thin, and she heard them talking, and she says about the wind and the flag, and she says, that each of them were wide of the mark. How lamentable, this is the quote from Miaoxin, you 17 blind donkeys or one-eyed donkeys, how many straw sandals have you worn out, wasted in your futile search for the Dharma? The Buddha Dharma has not yet appeared even in your dreams. It's pretty strong. So this is kind of overhearing what they're saying. So one of the postulants or one of these monks heard what she said and reported back, or maybe it was Miaoxin's postulants, reported back to the 17 monks what she had said. And they were, ashamed. They didn't get angry at her, like, what does she know? Why is she talking about us like that? And etc. They didn't resent her disapproval, it says. On the contrary, they were ashamed that their words were inadequate. And so comporting, this is a quote, comporting themselves in the proper fashion, meaning they got cleaned up, put on their obeisance, offered incense, and did bows, did Raihai, and respectfully inquired of her about the Dharma. And she said, step forward. She did meet with them, and they walked towards her, and she said, it's not the wind moving. It's not the flag moving. It's not your mind moving. Which is, this is a further turn of that wonderful koan that many of us know about, the mind moving. She said, it's not the mind moving. And when they were instructed in this way, all 17 of them were awakened all at once. And they expressed their gratitude and established a formal teaching relationship with Miaoxin, teacher-disciple relationship. And then they left and went back to their temple where they were studying, didn't climb the mountain to see Yangshan. They were satisfied. And there's, there's a lot to say about Miaoxin's understanding of this koan and this further turning of it. And we don't really have time to go into that and study it, but in the, there is a reference, it doesn't use her name, but in the Mumonkan, in the reference to this, in the commentary of one of the translations, it does say that someone says it's not your mind that's moving. And it's more like the entire universe is moving or ringing, the bell ringing or the flag waving. It's not your mind or the wind or the flag, but the entire universe. Thus is the bell ringing or the wind moving. So this story is praised by Dogen. If there's an office that's available and the best person is a woman to take that place, choose that person to lead the monastic community and rely on their clear eye. And then I don't want to end this talk without going into some of these quotes and the diatribe because I think this is such a big part of this fascicle and so affected me and is so modern in some ways, people trying to basically have dominion over women's lives as well as other groups of people, but we're talking about women during this time. So I do want to read some of these to you. And I remember at Tassajara, when I got to the end of the 90-day practice period, I kind of cut short this part because it was hard. I think it was hard for the group to hear. It was a little hard to read them, but I wanted to do this with you because I feel it's so important. So he basically says in China, there are nuns practicing in monasteries. And if they have the reputation of acquiring the Dharma or the marrow, the court, or the, because the government was very involved in Buddhist teaching and appointing abbots and so forth, the court will grant an edict appointing her as abbot of the nunnery. And she will go up to the hall. This is what he saw and heard about in China. Go up to the hall, give lectures. The abbot on down will come and listen to the lecture, and as she expounds the Dharma. And the monks will ask her questions. And this has been the rule. This is what he saw in China since ancient times. And then he says, if a nun is received and holds the treasury of the eye of the true Dharma, the arhats, the pratyeka Buddhas, and those on the bodhisattva path will come to pay obeisance, to Raihai, to bow and question her about the Dharma. What is so exalted about a man, says Dogen? Space is space. The four elements are the four elements. The five aggregates are the five aggregates. For a woman, it is the same thing. In acquiring the Dharma, all acquire the Dharma equally. All should pay homage to and hold in esteem one who has acquired the Dharma. Do not make an issue of whether they're a man or a woman. This is the most wondrous law of Buddha Dharma. And then he goes on. I'm going to skip a little bit. He does mention again a girl of, if a girl of 7 years old understands the Dharma, then you ask them, or the daughter of the Dragon King, that's from the Lotus Sutra, you ask them about the Dharma. So then he goes on, nuns have been venerated not as individuals, but because they've acquired the Dharma since ancient times. And arhats, and they have been venerated if they understand the Dharma. Even more so is this the case with those who have received the transmission of the true Dharma of the Tathagatas and revealed their noble intention of becoming bodhisattvas. Who would not venerate them? And then he goes into people who cater to women donors, women of high rank, and he says, they hasten to the gates of these women's homes and bang their heads on the footgear, hoping to gain favor. These are monks he's talking about who are kind of currying favor. I thought that was, banging their heads on the footgear. Interesting. Moreover, profoundly ignorant people today, believing that women are lustful objects. This is really an interesting point here. Believing that women are lustful objects, view them thus and do not correct this way of thinking. Followers of the Buddha should not behave in this way. If you despise women, believing them to be lustful objects, should not all men likewise be despised? It is a matter of becoming a cause for sexual, if it is a matter of becoming a cause for sexual impurity, men likewise may serve as objects of sexual attraction, just as women may be objects. So it's just undercutting, with Buddha Dharma logic, that it's not in the object where, it's one's own practice and afflictions. If there's, greed, hate, and delusion, basically. If you despise people in the belief that they have become objects of sexual lust, then men and women will all have to despise one another, such that there will be no opportunity for anyone to cross to the other shore. he's basically saying, where's your bodhisattva vow if you are despising beings because you have greed towards them or lust? It makes no sense. And then he goes on, furthermore, in Tang China, there was an ignorant monk who made a vow saying, for a long time, from life to life, generation to generation, I will not look at a woman. And then Dogen says, on what teaching is this based? Is it based on the teaching of the Buddhas? Is it based on the teaching of non-Buddhists? Is it based on the teaching of Mara, the evil one? What offenses are women guilty of? What virtues are men endowed with? As for evil persons, these are found among men. As for good persons, these are found among women. The desire to hear the Dharma and the search for emancipation certainly do not depend on whether you're a man or a woman. When delusions have not yet been severed, whether it be a man or a woman, these delusions remain unsevered. When delusions are severed and one experiences the truth, no distinctions exist as to whether it is a man or a woman. This is, of course, very binary thinking here. And I want to just note that I've noted that, and that this is, what Dogen is saying. Furthermore, if you vow never to look at a woman, must you then abandon women when you chant, beings are numberless, I vow to save them? If you abandon them, you're not a bodhisattva. Would you call this the compassion of the Buddhas? Since monks who vow not to look at women are profoundly intoxicated by the wine of the Shravaka, these are words of madness, induced by drunkenness. Humans and gods ought not believe such talk. Very strong, right? And he's talking about, fellow practitioners that he, knows. I vow never to look at a woman is crazy talk of ignoramuses who do not understand the Buddha Dharma. How sad. There's more, and I'm going to skip because, I don't really want to just read so much of this, and I want to leave time for questions. But basically, he says to make a vow like that is not the teaching of the Buddha, and it doesn't benefit human beings. I think the last thing I want to bring up is, and this is to this day, this still is going on. He says, furthermore, there is something laughable here in Japan, places called restricted realms or training halls for the practice of Mahayana that do not allow nuns or lay women to enter. This evil custom has been handed down over a long time, and no one's ever questioned it. So this has been going on. And scholars haven't investigated it. Who put forth this, established this? And then he says that no one has gone on to question that makes you laugh till you bust a gut. He's very, this is really, it's kind of coarse language, but it's like a slap across the face, that nobody's looking at this or saying, what's this all about? It's laughable. That makes you laugh till you bust a gut. And then he basically says, in these places where women and nuns are not allowed, what about the Buddha's 4 assemblies of monks, nuns, lay women, and lay men? Are you saying your places are better than the Buddha's Sangha and communities? The Buddha never had any rules like that, where women are not able to, seek Dharma. This is the realm of Mara. It's not a Buddhist assembly. So I think maybe when you look at the training halls today that forbid entry to nuns, we see that men who work there, like handymen or in the rice fields, or they come and go at will. What about women who have received Dharma transmission and understood the marrow of the way? They're not allowed in. What kind of teaching is this? In our extreme confusion, our small country was the first to bequeath to later generations this tradition of excluding women from monasteries. How sad that the eldest daughters of the compassionate father of the three realms, the Buddha, having come to our small country, discovered there were places that obstructed them and did not let them enter. This is how one repays our debt of gratitude to the Buddha? Have you understood the meaning of this? Whose Dharma did you inherit? Well, I'm going to end there. I realized I had wanted to get this kind of out and read these things, which are not easy to read. And partially because we're still dealing with this and androcentric, misogynist, and the patriarchy of that's still something we have to meet, both in our everyday life, political life, and sometimes in our practice places. So I'm going to end there and take some questions. And I want to apologize for going on so long, but I really felt I needed to. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reverend Cutts. No, please do not apologize. These are all gems. So I just want to thank you so much for being here today and for passing on this immense wisdom that you have. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Zena.
And also I just wanted to say the Q&A is now open. There is a comment that came through and I just wanted to acknowledge it, and that it's sad that 800,000 years later, we are still fighting the same battle in our modern lives. So that sort of echoes how you just wrapped up, Reverend Cutts. So, and I did see a hand earlier. I don't, I also, before I get started too, I just want to let you know that if we run over, feel free to just drop off if needed. This is recorded and we will send you a recording later in a follow-up email. Also, I have adjusted the controls on the chat. So if you do put a comment in the chat and you want it to be private, I assure you it will be private. So I do apologize for that. Okay, and I see that Carrie, and
Hi, good day, everyone. And thank you so much, Linda Ruth. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Nina and Carrie, yes.
Thank you. Yes, Nina is my Dharma name, and I know many of you there on the screen. I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing these stories with us. They're, as people have said, including yourself, that they're very timely in terms of political conversation. But also, I think that a lot of people are examining this prejudice against women. It seems that way to me. I certainly hope so, and it seems particularly troublesome in terms of religious practice. And I know that in other religious practices, I mean, some people say that Buddhism is not a religion, but for the sake of conversation, that in Islam and Judaism that there had been separation of men and women, and I think in the United States that's been addressed to some extent with Judaism. I don't know about Islam. Maybe that's changing as well. But my experience of being in a mosque in the Middle East and seeing how women were just off to the side and the men were had the main floor, so to speak, for bowing and praying was kind of disturbing. And so this is a very timely subject to bring up, and very helpful in kind of breaking it down with the Buddhist logic of the emptiness of these opinions and prejudices that I think we all hold to some extent, because in some way we can't help but take it on as, growing up with it. It's still a process of rooting it out and being aware of where these arise in ourselves and others. So I really love the story of Moshan, and she had a relationship with Linji. Is that what you said?
Her teacher did.
Her teacher did.
Gao
Uh-huh.
own, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, do you think that she then had some that she seems to have some of the qualities of the Zurinsai tradition as a more confrontational kind of style?
Yeah.
And I remember there's also a story, unless my memory is wrong, of her.
You just got muted somehow, Nina. I don't know why.
I apologize.
There we go. Of Moshan going to a temple, and it was raining, and she comes in and she says, "If you say a word, I'll take off my hat."
I think that was Shurji.
Oh, different
yeah.
person.
Yeah.
But the hat was the same.
He can't say anything, right?
Right, and he couldn't say anything, and then he tries to talk her into spending the night instead of going out into the storm. So it reminded me of that story. You think they were sharing those events?
Yes. I think, not taking off your hat means I don't respect you yet. I want to hear your Dharma. So give it to me, And he couldn't say anything. So I think she circled him 3 times or something and then left. But yeah. Moshan was actually able to say something to him and he took it off. So he did end up respecting her, but he started out with that similar attitude. Mm-hmm. Show me,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Prove it to me.
Prove it. Also, Carrie, what you were saying about these traditions, other traditions, I remember when I, in studying feminist theory and so forth, and reading people who were talking about their religious traditions, how they had to make excuses all the time because there were these things and that were in place that they had to work around. And I remember feeling upon reading this that coming from Dogen, who we study, we chant, it's such a formative teacher in our lineage, our first ancestor in Japan, the Soto lineage, in the lineage I'm in, to have him speak this way, it was like, what a relief, that the Dharma sees that rather than having to do a workaround, when they didn't quite get it and they're doing better now or something. I don't know. I just feel so much relief.
Right. It's just a natural evolution. And it's very confirming to hear this from the teacher that we have respected and studied for so long,
Yes.
to hear his views. And maybe you should start a practice period with it and get everybody worked up. But and also thank you for clarifying about the stories about transformation of the that the Naga princess was in the Lotus Sutra, and the transformation into Shariputra is being transformed into a woman was in the Vimalakirti Sutra. Is that correct?
Yeah. Do you know that story?
Yes, and I remember hearing Robert Thurman tell it in the hall at Gringotts. It was very dramatic, and it was the first time I'd heard that, and then subsequently read it. But my memory is kind of conflated those stories, so not quite sure which end they're from.
Yeah, I think I want to be open to other questions, because we're not just, we can go on.
Thank you very much.
But just there is a way of interpreting those stories as if, she did have to turn into a man to be a Buddha, rather than she had the capacity and is just playing with it, not that she. So there's a lot there too. But let's get another question.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. And next is Shakuchi.
Hello, Linda.
Hello, Shokuchi.
How nice to see you, and how wonderful that you gave us this beautiful talk.
Thank you.
I am so happy that you read aloud the words of Dogen at the end. I've read them, but I've never heard them aloud. And at the moment I heard your voice, I heard Dogen's voice. And in hearing Dogen's voice, I heard the voice of all the women through the centuries, speaking to us of their pain. So it was wonderful, wonderful feeling to connect with that. And so I'm wondering if I may ask, you had, from my eyes, a very fortunate path through your Zen practice. But of course, I only saw it from the outside. And I wonder if those voices were ever your voice. And if so, how did you practice with that? How did you deal with that?
Thank you, Shokuchi, for that question and for your comments. When I first started practicing in community, I remember when there had been a Shuso, Jean, I can't remember her last name now, but anyway, I remember that it was like even though from the get-go there were men and women practicing together, and probably non-binary, of course, everybody practicing together, there was not restricted. However, because of our culture, because of our patriarchy and culture, and our internalized androcentrism, male-centered way, I remember when Catherine was invited to be Shuso, Catherine Thanis, who later became the abbot of Santa Cruz, and some of you may be her students. And it was like, oh, Catherine is going to be Shuso, and join the ranks of all these other people. And same with Blanche. So there was, even though it was completely mixed, there was this added like, ooh, that's something, And nowadays, over the years, it's like, who's going to be Shuso? Who's ever ready? You know, who's ever senior enough? It just doesn't come into it. It's just, it really has dropped away, you know, from, ooh, it just doesn't, it's not there anymore, withered away. For me, I think, you know, being in positions of spiritual authority, abbas, tanto, I did come up upon, it never was said, like, I don't respect you because, although some of you might know a story that Fu tells when she was Tenzo, a head cook. If you're here, Fu, I'm telling you her story. Someone on the crew was not following, was late all the time, wasn't doing the job. And she talked with them and they said, well, you know, actually, I don't really like to have women in authority positions. And she said, you think I'm a woman? I'm the Tenzo. Anyway, I love that story. And it's there. It's in our own psyches. It's internalized and it comes up. And I think for me, it would come up with pushback and not inclusion and these kinds of things that were challenging, you know, and also styles of leading, more ensemble style was not necessarily respected the way a kind of, I don't know what to call the opposite of an ensemble, but one person, this is what I say, kind of. So yes, thank you for that question. And, you know, there were times when it was difficult. Yeah.
I would also just like to say thank you. I remember my time as Shuso, and I sat between, because of certain circumstances in the changing of abbatial positions, I sat between you and Fu. And I was, as Shuso, I thought, this is just wonderful. That image stays in my mind, to sit between two abbesses.
Yes, yes.
And I want to thank you, though, for your guidance and direction over that ceremony for me.
Thank you. I remember it. I remember it well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Kerrigan. And the next is Karen, and you may unmute your microphone.
I wanted to say thank you for this wonderful conversation and the spirit that you brought to it, which is very encouraging and passionate in a good way. I just really loved it. And I'm wondering two things. One thing I'm wondering is there a book in this? I hope that there could be. So I'll ask that, and then I have a second question.
Well, thank you, Karen. What a wonderful vote of I don't know what to say. I feel very warm just to hear you say that. I think there may be, but there isn't yet. Yeah. I did there is the beginning of a book on the Bodhisattva of infinite compassion, in which this could be part of that. After that pilgrimage to China and to all those Guanyin, seeing Guanyin practices, going to these temples, watching people devotedly, you know, offer in prostration and incense and other kinds of offerings to Guanyin, the Bodhisattva of infinite compassion in female form, because of course Avalokiteshvara is male and there's the androgynous one that's half and half that developed as well. So anyway, I'll think about that, Karen. Yes. Yeah.
I hope you will, because you clearly know a lot about this and also have the spirit to bring it forward. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the other thing I'm just noting in the examples of, the women teachers, they're all of them quite sharp. And I'm wondering if that's a matter of having to be sharp to get the attention, or if it's a stylistic thing with the school that they're part of, or what that sharpness is about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I connected with, of course, this is all in translation, but there is a kind of colloquial, is that how you pronounce it? A style of interchange and dialogue, and also actions. We know koans with pinched noses and foot slammed in the door, and I don't think it's genderized. I think it's full expression of the Dharma. Yeah. And, women have been acculturated, is that the word? To be nice, and to be often to not use the full power of that's to address or express something. It can be damped down sometimes. And I feel like these teachers are examples of full expression. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I was also thinking of Paula Arai's book about the nuns in Japan who used what she called more feminine paths to move forward. And I love that both of those were, but both of those exist.
Yes. Such a wonderful book about these practices, kind of hidden from mainstream, but so powerful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. And before we move on to our next question, I just want to remind everyone, if you need to drop off, feel free. We are recording this event and it will be available. Simone, you're up next. Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
Yes. Thank you so much for the talk and for bringing that fascicle to my attention. I'm a longtime practitioner, but I haven't read much of Dogen. I was kind of put off by him for a while. So my question, and this is remarkable, like it's so strong. So my question is, how much is there evidence of how much he actually put this into practice? You mentioned a few things that are known, a few female followers, but how much did he actually put his feminism into practice during his lifetime?
Yes. Thank you, Simone. That's a great question. We don't really know. I think there's these fragments that I named. We know he had a Dharma transmitted teacher, Ryonen, and there was a letter written to her where he praised her. So we know that one, and then these other members of his community and donors, benefactors, Shogaku, who donated the Dharma Hall and so forth. So it's, this is from the 1200s, 1240, so it's we don't know. And also in China, this is the thing about androcentric scholarship. There's the androcentric, meaning male-centered monks, male-centered teachers, male-centered translators, male-centered keepers of the records. And if you put that all together, we don't care about them, they're not a big deal, and we can only choose a few, so we choose these. So much I think is lost. Like there's one of the acharyas is Kongsher Dao Ren, who became a nun, but before she was a nun, she owned a bathhouse and would write poems on the bathhouse walls about basically the Dharma, and had written other things, but it's lost. It's all lost. And she had written things that were circulated that people knew about, but they're gone, you know. So there's a kind of sadness there, which is why when we chant the women ancestors, we say, for all the women teachers known and unknown, remembered through these names. These are the names we have, and that's not a full list by any means. Known and unknown, and there's some sadness in that, you know. Yeah.
It's just a shame he didn't start a nunnery or enable that to get created. You know.
Yes, yes. I think his, you know, in our lineage after Eihei Dogen Daioso, Kon Eijo Daioso, Hetsu Gikai Daioso, Keizan Jokin, very much supported women, supported nunneries. His mother became a nun after he went into the monastery at 8. And one of his, she's mentioned in the Acharyas, Eikon, and one of his disciples is, and I think he really did support, Keizan really was strong in supporting women's religious life. Yeah.
It's great. It's just interesting. You said this fascicle is kind of hidden and considered secret. That's very interesting. Yeah, but it's finally getting laid. It's just fantastic. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Simone.
Thank you, Simone. And before we wrap up, I just want to allow just one more comment here. Thank you so much, Eijun Roshi, for the great teaching and the opportunity to receive even greater clarity and guidance via the fascicle. I appreciate Dogen's attention to his quality of questioning custom that it excludes the opportunity for enlightenment for all beings. So, or it includes the opportunity for enlightenment for all beings. So important in our world and all worlds. Thank you for your time and teaching. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. I was very happy to be with you all today.
And we're very happy to have you, Reverend Cutts. And I just want to thank you very much. Thank you, Reverend Linda Ruth Cutts, Reverend Tova Green, and to the DEIA Committee of the Soto Zen Buddhist Association. And thank you very much for everyone who is attending for today's event.